Hello everyone. Welcome to Realist Quill. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Also, where are you from and what time are you watching now? Sarah didn't believe in taking the interstate when a scenic route was available. Even as the sun began to set during her drive home from her cousin's wedding in rural Montana, she ignored her GPS's urgent pleas to return to the main highway. Recalculating, the robotic voice announced for the third time as Sarah turned onto Route 87, a winding two-lane road that cut through dense pine forest. According to her map, this would shave 30 minutes off her journey back to Billings. Sarah had been driving for nearly an hour when she noticed how quickly darkness had fallen. The dense forest on either side of the narrow road blocked what little moonlight might have illuminated her path. Her headlights carved a tunnel through the darkness, revealing only a few yards of asphalt ahead. The first unusual thing Sarah noticed was the absence of other vehicles. She hadn't passed a single car since turning onto Route 87, nor had any passed her. The second was the sudden disappearance of all radio signals. Her favorite station dissolved into static, and scanning revealed nothing but white noise across all frequencies. Typical dead zone, Sarah muttered to herself, switching off the radio. The silence was immediately oppressive, broken only by the hum of her engine and the rhythmic sound of tires on asphalt. When the thumping began, Sarah initially thought she had a flat tire. The sound came at regular intervals, a dull thud she could feel through the steering wheel. She slowed the car, pulling onto the narrow shoulder to investigate. Standing in the cone of her headlights, Sarah circled the vehicle. All four tires were perfectly fine. She checked under the car, finding nothing unusual. The moment she slipped back behind the wheel, the thumping resumed, louder now, like something heavy being dropped onto the car's roof. Sarah accelerated, watching the empty road ahead with growing unease. Her cell phone showed no service, and the car's digital clock read 11:43 p.m., exactly the same time it had displayed 20 minutes earlier when she first noticed the thumping. The road should have connected with Highway 6. According to her map, the junction was just 15 miles after she turned onto Route 87, but she'd been driving for over an hour. Sarah pressed harder on the accelerator, the needle climbing past 60, then 70 miles per hour. The thumping increased its tempo to match her speed. At 80 miles per hour, Sarah's headlights illuminated something in the road ahead, a figure standing directly in her path. She slammed on the brakes, the car skidding sideways before coming to a stop just feet from impact. There was no one there. With hands shaking, Sarah put the car in park and took several deep breaths. When she looked up at her rearview mirror, she saw headlights approaching from behind, the first sign of another vehicle since she'd turned onto this road. Relief flooded through her. Sarah stepped out of her car and waved her arms, hoping the oncoming driver would stop and provide directions. The vehicle, an old pickup truck with a single functioning headlight, slowed as it approached. The driver's window rolled down, revealing an elderly man with deeply lined skin and eyes that reflected the light oddly, like an animal's. "You shouldn't be on this road at night," he said, his voice raspy. "No one drives Route 87. I'm just trying to get to Highway 16, Sarah explained. "I think I'm lost." The man's expression didn't change. Route 87 hasn't connected to any highway since 1977. When they built the new interstate. This road doesn't go anywhere now. Sarah felt a chill despite the warm summer night. "That's impossible. My GPS directed me this way." "Technology doesn't work right on this stretch," the man replied. "Nothing does, not since the accident." "What accident?" Sarah asked, though something told her she didn't want to know. "School bus full of children. Driver fell asleep. Went off the road right about here." The man pointed to the dense trees beside them. 17 dead. Youngest was 6. The thumping sound from Sarah's car suddenly intensified, no longer coming from the roof, but from inside the vehicle. She turned to look, seeing nothing through the windows but darkness. "They come back every night," the old man continued. "Walking this road, looking for a ride home. Most nights they just watch from the trees. But sometimes, if they find someone who doesn't belong, he trailed off, his gaze moving past Sarah to something behind her. Sarah turned slowly. Standing in perfectly straight lines along both sides of the road were children, their forms translucent in the moonlight. Their clothing was decades out of style, their faces smudged with dirt or perhaps blood. Each child stared silently at Sarah with empty, expectant eyes. "I've brought them someone new tonight," the old man said, his voice suddenly directly behind her. "Someone to drive them home." Sarah ran for her car, yanking the door open. Inside, every seat was occupied by the ghostly form of a child, their faces turning in unison to look at her. In the driver's seat sat a figure that made Sarah's blood freeze, an elderly man with the same lined face as the truck driver, but wearing a bus driver's uniform stained with dark patches. "We've been waiting for a replacement," the figure said, his voice coming from everywhere and nowhere. 47 years is a long shift. Sarah backed away from the car, but the children had closed ranks behind her, forming a tight circle. The old man from the truck was nowhere to be seen, and the truck itself had vanished. "It wasn't my fault," the bus driver's ghost said, stepping out of Sarah's car. "I only closed my eyes for a second. But the road doesn't forgive, and the children don't forget." The circle of ghostly children moved closer, their cold hands reaching for Sarah. She screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the dense forest surrounding the narrow road. "Your turn to drive now," the bus driver whispered, fading into the darkness as the children surged forward. 3 days later, Sarah's abandoned car was found on the modern Route 87, which runs parallel to but a mile away from the old road that was decommissioned in 1978. Despite extensive searches, Sarah herself was never located. Local residents avoid the old Route 87, especially after dark. Those who live nearby report occasionally seeing headlights moving slowly along the abandoned road at night, and the sound of children singing a school bus song, their voices carrying through the trees before fading into silence. Travelers passing through Montana are advised to stay on the interstate. GPS systems in the area are known to malfunction, sometimes directing drivers onto roads that officially no longer exist. If your navigation system suggests a shortcut through the pine forest after sunset, it's better to ignore it. Some roads are empty for a reason. Detective James Mercer had been with the Highway Patrol for 18 years, but he'd never seen anything like the case that landed on his desk in October 2015. 6 disappearances over 16 months, all centered around a 20-mile stretch of Highway 301 in rural South Carolina. The disappearances followed a pattern. Each victim was traveling alone. Each one had last been seen at the Pine Grove gas station at the highway's northern end, and each one had vanished somewhere between mile markers 24 and 28, leaving behind vehicles with engines running, doors unlocked, and no signs of struggle. "It doesn't make sense," Mercer told his partner, Detective Wilson, as they reviewed the files. 6 people don't just vanish from the same stretch of road without someone seeing something. Wilson shrugged. "It's a lonely road. Traffic cameras only at the major intersections. Nearest one is 15 miles from the disappearance zone." Mercer spread the victims' photos across his desk. A college student driving home for Thanksgiving, a traveling salesman, a nurse working the night shift, a retired couple in their RV, a long-haul trucker. Nothing connected them except the road where they'd vanished. "I'm driving it tonight," Mercer announced. Same conditions as the disappearances, solo after midnight, northbound. Wilson tried to talk him out of it, but Mercer was determined. By 11:30 p.m., he was pulling into the Pine Grove gas station in his unmarked sedan, dressed in civilian clothes with only his service weapon concealed under his jacket. The attendant, a bored teenager named Kyle, hardly looked up from his phone when Mercer entered. Following protocol, the detective purchased coffee and asked casual questions about the road ahead. "Highway 301? It's straight all the way to Greenville," Kyle said, eyes still on his screen. "Not much out there till you hit the interstate. Heard anything strange about that stretch?" Mercer asked, keeping his tone conversational. "Any accidents or problems lately?" At this, Kyle finally looked up, his expression guarded. "You're not from around here." It wasn't a question. Mercer nodded, maintaining his cover as a traveling businessman. Kyle glanced toward the door, then leaned forward. "Look, I'm not supposed to say nothing about it. Boss says it's bad for business, but if you're heading up 301, you should know people been disappearing out there." "Disappearing?" Mercer feigned surprise. "Between mile markers 24 and 28, Kyle confirmed. "Local folks don't drive that stretch after dark no more. Not since they found that object." Mercer's interest sharpened. "What object?" Kyle lowered his voice further. "About 2 years back, something fell from the sky into the woods off mile marker 26. Government types came in, cordoned everything off for a week, said it was a weather balloon, but my cousin works for the county and helped with the cleanup. Said it wasn't like any weather balloon he ever saw." Before Mercer could press further, the door chimed as another customer entered. Kyle straightened up, his expression closing. "You have a safe trip now," he said loudly, turning to the new arrival. Back in his car, Mercer called Wilson to report the new information. No mention of any fallen object or government investigation appeared in their case files. "Probably nothing," Wilson said through the crackling connection. "Local conspiracy theory to explain the disappearances. I'm checking it out anyway," Mercer replied, pulling back onto highway. "I'll call when I reach marker." The highway stretched before him, empty and dark. His headlights illuminated reflective markers counting the miles, 18, 19, 20. The radio began to pick up interference. Static, overwhelming, every station. Mercer switched it off, focusing on the road. At mile marker 22, his cell phone lost service. The car's GPS system followed, the screen freezing before going dark. Even his police radio produced nothing but static. "Expected," Mercer muttered to himself, having been briefed about the communication dead zone in this area. He continued driving, hyper-aware of his surroundings as the counter hit mile marker 24, the beginning of the disappearance zone. The road here was perfectly straight, bordered by dense pine forest on both sides. No streetlights illuminated the highway. Only Mercer's headlights cut through the pitch darkness. His dashboard clock read 12:17 a.m. At mile marker 25, Mercer noticed a subtle change in the atmosphere. The air inside his car felt heavier, charged with static electricity that made the hair on his arms stand up. Outside, an unnatural silence had fallen. Even the sound of his tires on the asphalt seemed mute. He checked his speed, 55 mph, exactly at the limit, and his fuel gauge, which showed half a tank. Everything normal, except for the crawling sensation at the back of his neck that told him he was being watched. Mile marker 26 came into view, the reflective numbers gleaming in his headlights. Mercer scanned the tree line, looking for any sign of the object Kyle had mentioned. Nothing seemed out of place, but the forest was too dense to see more than a few feet past the shoulder. That's when he noticed the lights in his rearview mirror. Another vehicle had appeared behind him, though he hadn't passed any entrance ramps or side roads. The lights were unusual, not the standard white headlights, but a pale blue that cast an eerie glow on the road. Mercer maintained his speed, watching as the vehicle behind him closed the distance with unnatural quickness. Within seconds, it was directly behind him, so close he couldn't see its make or model, only the blinding blue lights that now flooded his car's interior. He considered his option: pull over, accelerate. Before he could decide, his engine died without warning. All electrical systems in the car shut down simultaneously: headlights, dashboard, power steering. The vehicle coasted in darkness, slowing rapidly. Mercer gripped the wheel, guiding the car to the shoulder as it rolled to a stop. The blue lights behind him remained, now stationary as well. He reached for his service weapon, then froze as he realized the lights were no longer coming from behind his vehicle. They were above it. A brilliant blue-white light bathed the entire car, bright enough that Mercer had to shield his eyes. Through squinted lids, he could see that the light came from an object hovering approximately 50 feet above the highway, a disc-shaped craft, that made no sound as it maintained perfect position over his vehicle. Mercer's training deserted him. He fumbled with the door handle, but the locks wouldn't respond. The temperature inside the car dropped rapidly. His breath formed visible clouds in the suddenly frigid air. The static charge intensified until he felt his skin tingling painfully. Through the windshield, Mercer saw something moving on the road ahead. A figure was walking toward his car, humanoid but wrong in proportions, with limbs too long and thin. It moved with unsettling grace, covering the distance between them in long, fluid stride. Mercer tried to start the car again, pounding the steering wheel when nothing happened. The figure reached the hood of his vehicle and stopped. In the harsh blue light, Mercer could see it clearly now. A being approximately 7 feet tall with grayish skin stretched tight over an elongated frame. Its face held no features except enormous black eyes that reflected the light like polished obsidian. A voice spoke directly into Mercer's mind, bypassing his ears entirely. "You are the Seventh." Mercer tried to respond, but his voice failed him. The being tilted its head, regarding him with those bottomless eyes. "The others have adapted well. You will too." The car door opened, though Mercer hadn't touched the handle. The freezing air rushed in, carrying an odd metallic scent. The being extended one long-fingered hand toward him. "It is time." Against his will, Mercer felt his body respond, unbuckling his seatbelt and turning toward the open door. He fought against the compulsion, gripping the steering wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. "What did you do with them?" he managed to ask, his voice barely a whisper. The being's response came with a sense of puzzlement, as if the question made no sense. "They are where they have always been, where you will be, where we all are." Mercer felt his resistance weakening. His hands relaxed their grip on the wheel. His legs moved to swing out of the car. The being stepped back, making room for him to exit. In a last desperate move, Mercer reached for his weapon. His fingers closed around the grip, but before he could draw it, the blue light intensified to blinding brightness. Mercer felt a sensation like being unmade, his consciousness separating from his physical form. The last thing Detective James Mercer saw was mile marker 26 gleaming in the unearthly light. Then, 3 weeks later, a highway patrol officer found Mercer's car parked neatly on the shoulder of Highway 3 at mile marker 26. The engine was cold, the doors locked, the keys in the ignition. Mercer's service weapon, badge, wallet, and phone were all present. The only thing missing was Detective Mercer himself. The official investigation concluded nothing. No evidence, no witnesses, no explanation for what happened to the detective or the 6 victims before him. But travelers on Highway 301 report a new phenomenon. Between mile markers 24 and 28, cell phones sometimes pick up strange transmissions, fragments of conversations, distress calls, and most recently, a voice that sounds remarkably like Detective Mercer, repeating the same message: "Stay off this road after dark." They're watching. They're always watching, and they need one more. Highway 301 remains open. The disappearances have stopped, for now, but locals avoid the stretch between markers 24 and They say sometimes, if you look up at just the right moment, you'll see blue lights hovering above the tree line, waiting for the next traveler foolish enough to drive that empty road alone. Dr. Elaine Weiss had spent her entire academic career studying acoustic anomalies. As a professor of audio engineering at MIT, she'd traveled to the world's most famous echo chambers, recorded the underwater songs of whales, and developed algorithms to clean up garbled radio transmissions from deep space. But nothing in her 20 years of research had prepared her for what awaited in Echo Canyon. The first reports came from truckers, seasoned men and women who regularly drove the remote stretch of Route 47 that wound through the canyon in northern Nevada. They described a section of road where their CB radios picked up impossible transmissions, conversations they'd had hours earlier, broadcasts from stations that had gone off the air decades ago, And most disturbing, their own voices saying things they hadn't yet spoken. Most scientists dismissed these accounts as hallucinations brought on by fatigue or the isolation of long-haul driving. But Elaine saw patterns in the reports that suggested something more complex was occurring. When the National Science Foundation approved her grant to investigate, she assembled a team of 3 researchers and enough recording equipment to document whatever phenomena they encountered. In June of 2019, Elaine and her team set out for Echo Canyon in a van outfitted as a mobile laboratory. The journey took them deep into the Nevada desert, following Route 47 as it narrowed from a 4-lane highway to a winding 2-lane road carved into increasingly rugged terrain. According to the reports, the anomaly zone begins approximately 20 miles into the canyon. Elaine told her team as they passed a weathered sign welcoming them to Echo Canyon National Forest. "We'll start recording 5 miles out and continue through to the other side." Her research assistant David nodded, adjusting the sensitivity on their primary recording array. All systems online and calibrated. "If there's anything unusual to hear, we'll capture it." The canyon lived up to its name even before they reached the reported anomaly zone. Their test signals, short bursts of white noise played through external speakers, returned as perfect echoes, repeating multiple times as they bounced between the sheer rock walls that rose hundreds of feet on either side of the road. "Remarkable acoustic properties," noted Chen, their audio engineer. "Nearly perfect reflectivity in the rock composition." As they drove deeper into the canyon, the late afternoon sun disappeared behind the western ridge, plunging the road into premature twilight. Elaine checked the odometer. They were approaching the beginning of the anomaly zone as marked on their maps. "Start full spectrum recording," she instructed. "All channels maximum sensitivity." For several miles, they detected nothing unusual. Then as they rounded a bend near mile marker 117, every device in the van registered a sudden spike in ambient electromagnetic activity. "Something's interfering with our equipment," Chen reported, watching as the digital displays flickered. "Signal's too strong. It's overwhelming our filters." Through the speakers came a wash of static, followed by fragments of what sounded like radio broadcasts, news reports, music, advertisements, cutting in and out too quickly to identify. Elaine adjusted the reception parameters, trying to isolate and enhance any coherent signals within the noise. "There's a pattern," she said after several minutes of listening. "It's cycling through frequencies, but not randomly. There's a sequence." As if in response to her observation, the static cleared, replaced by a crystal-clear transmission, their own conversation from moments earlier. "A pattern. It's cycling through frequencies, but not randomly. There's a sequence." David looked up from his equipment, eyes wide. "That's impossible. Our system doesn't have any playback functionality running." Before Elaine could respond, another voice came through the speakers, also hers but different. "Initial testing confirms localized temporal displacement of acoustic waves. Recommend full overnight monitoring to establish pattern recognition. This is Elaine Weiss, Day 1 at Echo Canyon." The timestamp matched the current time exactly, but Elaine hadn't recorded any such log entry. "Is this some kind of joke?" the third team member, Jameson, asked nervously. "Did you pre-record that?" Elaine shook her head slowly. "Checking the recording equipment. That's my voice, but I didn't say it. At least, not yet." As they continued driving, the phenomena intensified. Their receivers picked up snippets of conversations between team members that hadn't occurred, technical discussions of data they hadn't yet gathered, and most disturbingly, arguments about interpretations of evidence they hadn't collected. "I think we should stop and set up the overnight monitoring station," Elaine decided, as they approached mile marker 2. "This area seems to be the epicenter of the anomaly." They pulled onto a wide shoulder and began unloading their equipment. The canyon walls loomed above them, the rock faces turning deep purple in the fading light. The air was unnaturally still, creating an oppressive silence broken only by the occasional distant echo of their movements. echoes that seemed to last longer than acoustically possible. By midnight, they had established a perimeter of microphones and electromagnetic sensors extending 50 yards in each direction from their base camp. Inside the van, monitors displayed real-time data streams from each device. The phenomena had continued unabated, with their equipment capturing what appeared to be fragments of future conversations mixed with historical broadcasts. At precisely 1:17 a.m., every system simultaneously registered an enormous spike in activity. The monitors flashed warning signals as input levels exceeded maximum thresholds. Through the speakers came a cacophony of voices, hundreds, perhaps thousands of overlapping transmissions. "It's like we're picking up everything ever said in this canyon," David whispered, adjusting the filters to try to isolate individual signals. Elaine noticed something else. Not just what's been said. Listen. She fine-tuned one channel, bringing forward a voice they all recognized as David's. "Equipment failure on all fronts. Dr. Weiss is missing. We've searched the entire area but found no trace. This will be my final log entry before we abort the mission. Whatever's happening here is beyond our capacity to explain or control." The timestamp attached to the transmission was 4:38 a.m., 3 hours in their future. David's face drained of color. "That's not possible. I wouldn't abandon a search for you." Elaine tried to maintain scientific objectivity, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the equipment. "Let's isolate more signals. There might be an explanation in the data." For the next hour, they captured and analyzed dozens of transmissions, their own voices discussing events that hadn't yet occurred, some mundane, others increasingly distressed. In each future scenario, sometime between 3:15 and 3:45 a.m., Elaine apparently walked away from the camp and disappeared. "This is absurd," Jamison said, checking his watch nervously. It was approaching 2:30 a.m. "These aren't real transmissions. It's some kind of elaborate echo or reflection." "From what source?" Elaine countered. "There's no technology that could produce this effect." As they debated, a new transmission broke through, a male voice none of them recognized. "To anyone receiving this warning, the canyon doesn't just echo sound, it echoes time. The deeper you go, the further the displacement. We've been trapped here for, I don't know how long anymore. Days bleed into each other when you're hearing your past and future simultaneously. If you're still near the entrance, leave immediately. Beyond mile marker 20, the effect becomes permanent." The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Chen looked up from the GPS. "We're at marker 22 now." Elaine made a decision. "Pack up. We're leaving." They worked quickly, disassembling their monitoring stations and loading equipment back into the van. As they prepared to depart, Elaine noticed something odd about the canyon walls in the beam of her flashlight, faint markings that looked like writing. "Give me 5 minutes," she told the others. Approaching the rock face for a closer look, the markings were names and dates, hundreds of them etched into the stone at various heights. Some appeared decades old, others relatively recent. Below each name was a set of coordinates and 2 timestamps. Eric Sandoval, 1977. Entered 8:14 p.m. September 3. Elaine read aloud. The next entry, Maria Chen, 1983. Entered 11:42 a.m. March 7. Exited 11:42 a.m. March 7 2. These weren't normal graffiti. They were records left by people who had experienced temporal displacement in the canyon. The exit dates were often years or decades after their entry dates, though presumably only hours or days had passed for the individuals themselves. The most recent entry, dated just 2 weeks earlier, read, Adam Keller, 2019. Entered 3:18 p.m. June 1. Exited pending. As Elaine stepped back from the wall, her foot dislodged a small rock, sending it skittering down the slope. The sound echoed normally at first, then returned again louder, then again even louder, each echo increasing in volume rather than diminishing. She turned to hurry back to the van, but froze as a blinding light suddenly illuminated the entire canyon. From around the bend ahead came the unmistakable sound of their own van's engine, followed by the vehicle itself. an exact duplicate of the one parked 50 yards away. The duplicate van drove past their position without stopping, its headlights briefly illuminating three familiar figures inside. Elaine and her team, expressions focused as they monitored their equipment. Elaine caught a glimpse of her own face through the window, watching as her doppelganger checked her watch. The same gesture she herself had made hours earlier when they first entered the canyon. Temporal loop, Elaine whispered, the scientific implications overwhelming her fear for a moment. We're seeing ourselves from earlier today. As the duplicate van disappeared around the next bend, the light faded and the canyon returned to darkness. Elaine ran back to her team, who stood frozen beside their vehicle, having witnessed the same impossible event. We need to leave now, she ordered, climbing into the driver's seat. The others followed without argument. But when Elaine turned the key, the engine made a sickening grinding sound and failed to start. 3 more attempts yielded the same result. The battery's dead, Chen confirmed after checking under the hood. It was fully charged when we arrived. The equipment must have drained it, David suggested, though they all knew their systems ran on independent power supplies. Elaine checked her watch. 3:12 a.m. According to the future transmissions, she would walk away from the group in approximately 3 minutes. Listen to me, she told her team, fighting to keep her voice steady. Whatever happens, stay together. Don't separate, no matter what you hear or see. At exactly 3:15 a.m., their equipment came to life again without power, all speakers emitting a high-pitched tone that forced them to cover their ears. When it stopped seconds later, the canyon was filled with voices. Hundreds of overlapping conversations, arguments, pleas, and screams, all echoing between the rock walls. Within the cacophony, Elaine could distinguish her own voice calling from somewhere up the road. Help! I found something! Quickly! That's not me, she told the others firmly, gripping David's arm as he instinctively turned toward the sound. I'm right here. Another voice called. Chen's this time. Sounding panicked, she's gone over the edge. Rope! We need rope. Despite knowing it was some kind of deception, Elaine felt herself drawn toward the voices, a compulsion nearly physical in its intensity. Looking at her teammates, she could see they felt it too, an irresistible pull to move toward their phantom voices. Hold on to each other, she commanded, forming a human chain with her team. The voices continued, becoming more desperate. Phantom footsteps surrounded them, though they could see no one in the darkness. Equipment they'd already packed away seemed to activate from inside the van, lights blinking behind the closed doors. At 3:42 a.m., exactly as predicted in the future transmission, Elaine felt a sudden vertigo that nearly brought her to her knees. The air around her shimmered like a heat mirage, and for a brief moment, she could see multiple versions of herself and her team scattered across the canyon floor. Some just arriving, some setting up equipment, some frantically searching, some sitting in defeated silence. It's a temporal fracture, she realized aloud. The canyon is a natural phenomenon that disrupts the linear progression of time. As dawn approached, the phenomena gradually subsided. By the time the first light touched the canyon rim, their equipment had gone silent, the phantom voices had ceased, and the feeling of compulsion had faded. A passing truck driver stopped to help jumpstart their van, seeming unsurprised by their presence or their obvious distress. Got caught by the night voices, didn't you? He asked, knowingly. Happens to folks who don't know better than to stay in Echo Canyon after dark. You know about the phenomena? Elaine asked. The driver nodded. Everyone who regularly drives this route knows. Some say it's the canyon walls trapping radio waves from different times. Others think it's something about the mineral composition messing with people's minds. I think some places just exist a little sideways to normal time. As they prepared to leave, Elaine approached the rock wall one last time, carrying a small chisel from their toolkit. Near the most recent entry, she carefully etched her own. Dr. Elaine Weiss, 2019, entered, 5:47 p.m., June 7. Then below it, she added, warning, time is not linear in Echo Canyon. What you hear is real. Stay in the present. The research team left Echo Canyon that morning and never returned. Their recordings, when analyzed at MIT, contained nothing but static and the occasional natural echo. All evidence of the temporal anomalies had vanished from the digital files. Elaine published no papers on Echo Canyon. She declined to discuss the experience in professional settings and refused all offers to fund a return expedition. Her only comment, when pressed by colleagues, was that some phenomena were not meant to be studied, only survived. Route 47 through Echo Canyon remains open. Truck drivers still use it as a shortcut, though most pass through only during daylight hours. At night, the road stands empty except for the occasional lost traveler who didn't heed the new sign posted at the canyon entrance. Caution: radio interference possible next 20 miles. In case of emergency, do not leave your vehicle. Echo Canyon closes to overnight parking at sunset. Those who ignore the warning report hearing voices in the darkness, sometimes their own, sometimes strangers, always echoing conversations that haven't yet occurred. Some hear themselves crying for help, some hear themselves dying, and some, like Elaine Weiss, hear themselves making discoveries too dangerous to pursue. Mason Shaw hadn't driven this stretch of coastal highway in 15 years. Not since the night his life had split into before and after. As his rental car hugged the curves of California's Highway 1, he felt an unsettling sense of déjà vu. The same hairpin turns, the same guardrails separating asphalt from 100-foot drops to jagged rocks and churning ocean. The same fog rolling in as twilight approached. It was early April, technically off-season for the scenic route. Traffic had been sparse since he'd left San Francisco that morning, becoming non-existent once he passed the turnoff for Monterey. Now, with the sun sinking toward the horizon, Mason found himself alone on the winding road. Just as he had been that night, he hadn't planned to make this journey. The conference in San Francisco had been scheduled months ago, but the rental car and coastal drive had been impulsive decisions made only yesterday. Something about being back in California after so long had stirred memories he'd spent years trying to bury. In the passenger seat, Mason's phone chirped with a notification. The screen showed 3 missed calls from his wife, Rebecca. He'd promised to check in once he reached his hotel in Los Angeles, but that wouldn't be for hours yet. Reception along this stretch was notoriously unreliable. He was surprised the notification had come through at all. Mason glanced at the phone, considering whether to try returning the call despite the spotty coverage. As he did, his attention drifted from the road for just a second, long enough to miss the sharp curve ahead. He looked up just in time to wrench the wheel, tires screeching as the car swerved dangerously close to the guardrail. Heart pounding, Mason corrected his course and pulled onto a scenic overlook to collect himself. "Idiot," he muttered, putting the car in park and taking several deep breaths. The near miss had left him shaken, too reminiscent of another momentary distraction 15 years ago that had ended far worse. Mason rubbed his temples, willing away the memory of screeching tires, shattering glass, and Emma's terrified scream. His fiancée hadn't survived the crash. Mason had walked away with minor injuries and maximum survivor's guilt, a combination that had sent him fleeing California, changing careers and eventually starting a new life 3,000 miles away. Now, sitting at the same overlook where he'd waited for emergency services that night, Mason felt the weight of 15 years of avoidance pressing down on him. He picked up his phone, thinking to call Rebecca, to hear her voice as an anchor to his present life. No, sir. The notification must have come through during a brief pocket of coverage that had already disappeared. The fog was thickening rapidly, unusual for this early in the evening. It crept up from the ocean below, enveloping his car in a shifting gray blanket that reduced visibility to mere yard. The sun was still visible, a diffuse orange glow low on the horizon, but its light seemed unable to penetrate the advancing mist. Mason checked his watch. 6:43. He'd planned to reach Los Angeles by midnight, but at this rate, the drive would take longer. He should get moving before the fog became too dense to navigate safely. As he put the car in drive, his phone rang. The sudden sound in the quiet car made him jump. The screen displayed unknown color but showed full signal strength, despite the lack of service moments earlier. Puzzled, Mason answered, "Hello?" At first there was only static, broken by fragments of what sounded like a woman's voice. The connection was terrible, the words unintelligible. "I can't hear you," Mason said loudly. The connection's breaking up, more static. Then 3 words came through, with startling clarity. "Mason, turn around." His blood ran cold. It wasn't Rebecca's voice. "Who is this?" he demanded, though part of him already knew. The static intensified, then cleared. "It's Emma. You need to turn around now." Mason nearly dropped the phone. Emma had been dead for 15 years. This had to be some kind of cruel prank, or his mind playing tricks after the stress of the near accident. "This isn't funny," he said, his voice shaking. "Who is this really?" "Mason, please listen." The voice was undeniably Emma's. The slight Midwestern accent, the way she always emphasized the second syllable of his name. "You're in danger. What happened to me is going to happen to you if you don't turn around." "You're not real," Mason whispered, even as goosebumps raised on his arms. "Emma died 15 years ago." "I know when I died," the voice replied, a hint of the old impatience he remembered so well. "I was there, April 8, 2009 at 9:17 p.m., when you looked down at your phone instead of at the curve ahead." Mason felt sick. The exact time of the accident wasn't in any news reports. He had never told anyone about checking his phone. Not the police, not the insurance investigators, not even his therapist. He had carried that detail as his private burden of guilt for 15 years. "How could you possibly know that?" he asked, his mouth dry. "Because I'm caught here," Emma's voice replied, growing more urgent. "At the moment between life and death. And so are the others, everyone who's died on this stretch. We see it happen, over and over. We try to warn people when we can, when the conditions are right." "What conditions?" Mason asked, unable to help himself. This was insane, impossible, yet he couldn't bring himself to end the call. "The fog is a thinning of the barrier," Emma explained, her voice fading in and out, "between your world and whatever comes after. It happens a few times each year, on this highway. And tonight I saw you, Mason, driving the same stretch where I died, at almost the same time of year." Mason looked out at the fog surrounding his car. It seemed to pulse with a faint luminescence, unlike any natural fog he'd ever seen. "This isn't possible," he said weakly. "Neither is coincidence," Emma countered. "Do you think it's random that you decided to drive this route today after 15 years of avoiding it? That you nearly crashed at the same overlook where you lost control that night? Nothing about this is coincidence, Mason. The road wants you." "The road wants me," Mason repeated incredulously. "Roads don't want things. This one does," Emma insisted. "There's something about this stretch of Highway 1. It draws people who have connections to previous accidents. It creates the conditions, the fog, the distractions. It's been happening for decades. Why do you think they've had to rebuild the guardrails so many times?" Mason recalled reading something years ago about this section of coastal highway having an unusually high accident rate. Despite good road conditions and clear signage, engineers had conducted multiple safety studies, but found no obvious cause for the statistical anomaly. "I don't understand," Mason said. "Why would a road want to cause accidents?" "I don't know if want is the right word." Emma's voice had grown fainter, as if she were moving away from whatever allowed this impossible communication. "It's more like hunger. The road collects souls, Mason. It keeps us here, in the fog, between worlds." A chill ran through him that had nothing to do with the evening air. "You're saying you're trapped here for 15 years? Time works differently here. Sometimes it feels like days, sometimes centuries." "Please, Mason, you need to turn around. Head back to Monterey. Stay somewhere else tonight. Break the pattern." The call began breaking up again, Emma's voice dissolving into static. Mason gripped the phone tighter, suddenly desperate not to lose the connection. "Emma, Wait, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry about what happened. It was my fault. Her voice cut through the interference one last time. Mason, behind you. He looked up at the rear-view mirror. Through the fog, two headlights had appeared on the road behind his parked car, approaching rapidly. Too rapidly for the limited visibility. Instinctively, Mason tensed, waiting for the screech of brakes. It never came. The headlights maintained their speed, growing larger in his mirror. At the last possible second, Mason realized the oncoming vehicle wasn't going to stop. He lunged across the passenger seat just as the impact came, a violent jolt that shoved his car forward, crumpling the rear end and shattering the back window. Mason's head struck the dashboard. Dazed, he looked up through the fractured windshield. His car had been pushed to the very edge of the overlook, the front tires partially over the drop. Through blurred vision, he could see nothing but fog beyond the hood, and a 100-foot drop to the rocks below. Behind him there should have been another vehicle, damaged from the collision. Instead, when Mason turned painfully in his seat, he saw only empty road and swirling fog. No car, no driver, no evidence of what had just hit him with such force. His phone lay on the floor, the call disconnected. When he picked it up with trembling hands, the screen showed no service again. The last call received was still logged, but now it displayed a different source. Not unknown caller, but a number Mason recognized with a jolt of horror. It was Emma's old cell phone number, disconnected 15 years ago after her death. As Mason stared at the screen, a text message appeared from the same number. "Get out of the car now." Without questioning, Mason shoved the door open and stumbled out onto the pavement. His legs nearly buckled, partly from shock and partly from the blow to his head. He staggered away from the vehicle, toward the center of the small parking area. Behind him came a sound of straining metal. Mason turned in time to see his rental car shift forward, as if pushed by invisible hands. The front tires, already partially over the edge, lost their grip on solid ground. With a grinding of metal against concrete, the car tipped forward and disappeared over the cliff edge. Seconds later, a distant crash echoed up from below, followed by silence. Mason stood alone in the fog-shrouded overlook, trying to process what had just happened. His phone chimed again, another text message from Emma's number. "Others are coming. Run." In the distance, Mason could hear engines, multiple vehicles approaching from both directions. Through the fog, he glimpsed headlights moving at impossible speeds, given the limited visibility, weaving across lanes as they raced toward the overlook. Mason didn't wait to see more. He ran for the hiking trail that led away from the road and down toward the beach, moving as quickly as he dared on the steep, fog-obscured path. Behind him, he heard screeching tires, collisions, the blare of horns, a cacophony of traffic accidents that should have been impossible on an empty road. When he reached the beach an hour later, the fog had thinned. Mason's phone, remarkably still functioning, showed full service. With shaking hands, he called Rebecca, who answered on the first ring. "Mason, where are you? I've been trying to reach you for hours. I'm okay," he managed, though it was far from true. "There was an accident. My car went over the cliff at an overlook on Highway 1. Oh my God, are you hurt? Have you called 911? I'm going to call them next," Mason assured her, trying to sound calmer than he felt. "I just wanted to hear your voice first." After ending the call with Rebecca, Mason dialed emergency services. He reported the accident, giving his location as best he could determine. The dispatcher sounded concerned but not surprised. "We've had multiple reports of accidents along that stretch tonight," she told him. "Unusual for this time of year. Rescue services are already responding to the area. Stay where you are, sir. Someone will find you." When state troopers and paramedics arrived 30 minutes later, they found Mason sitting on the beach, staring out at the ocean, where the fog had completely dissipated. revealing a clear night sky scattered with stars. The official report documented 7 separate accidents along a 10-mile stretch of Highway 1 that night. 3 fatalities, 12 injuries. Investigators blamed the unexpected fog and drivers' failure to adjust their speed appropriately. Mason's rental car was recovered from the rocks below the overlook, crushed beyond recognition. When asked what had caused him to go over the cliff, Mason chose his words carefully. He mentioned the fog, a moment of distraction, the treacherous curve. He said nothing about phone calls from the dead or roads that hungered for souls. 2 days later, after being released from the hospital with minor injuries, Mason visited the small memorial that had been erected years ago, near the overlook where Emma had died. Someone had recently placed fresh flowers there, not just at Emma's marker, but at several others commemorating various fatal accidents over the decades. Mason added his own small bouquet, then placed his hand on Emma's memorial plaque. "Thank you," he whispered, "for warning me, for saving me." As he turned to leave, his phone chimed with a text message. The screen showed no sender, not even an unknown number. Just 3 words: "Don't come back." Mason never drove Highway 1 again. On foggy nights, he silences his phone and stays home. Sometimes, in his dreams, he hears the sounds of accidents he never witnessed: screeching tires, shattering glass, screams cutting off abruptly. And sometimes, just before waking, he hears Emma's voice telling him that the road is still hungry, still collecting souls between worlds. When news reports mention accidents on that coastal highway, Mason notes the dates and conditions. They almost always occur during unusual fog, typically at dusk or after nightfall. He wonders how many of the victims received warnings they didn't heed, calls they couldn't believe. On the anniversary of Emma's death each year, Mason sends a text to her old number, though logic tells him the number must have been reassigned long ago. He never receives a reply, and whoever might have that number now has never questioned his annual message. "I remember, and I warn others about the road." The first time Cassandra met the highway trader, she was 18 years old and stranded on an empty stretch of Interstate 25 in New Mexico. Her ancient Honda Civic had finally given up after 200,000 miles of faithful service, belching steam from under the hood before shuddering to a stop on the shoulder. It was July 2015, and the desert heat was merciless. Cassandra had checked her phone immediately. No service. The nearest town was 30 miles back, the next one 40 miles ahead. She'd passed a car perhaps 20 minutes earlier, but otherwise the highway had been eerily empty, even for a Tuesday afternoon. After an hour of waiting, hood up, thumb out whenever headlights appeared in the distance, which happened exactly twice, neither vehicle slowing. Cassandra was growing concerned. Her water bottle was nearly empty, and the sun wouldn't set for hours. That's when she spotted the approaching vehicle, a vintage Airstream trailer gleaming silver in the sunlight, pulled by an equally immaculate 1950s pickup truck, both impossibly pristine. The truck slowed as it approached, pulling onto the shoulder about 20 feet ahead of her disabled Honda. The driver who emerged didn't match the vehicles. Cassandra had expected an older man, perhaps a retired couple traveling the country. Instead, a woman who appeared to be in her 30s stepped out. She wore jeans and a plain white t-shirt that somehow looked elegant rather than casual. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple ponytail, and she moved with a fluid grace that immediately made Cassandra conscious of her own sweat-stained clothes and wind-blown appearance. "Car trouble?" the woman asked, approaching with a slight smile. Her voice carried a hint of an accent Cassandra couldn't place. "It just died," Cassandra explained. "Overheated, I think, but it's probably terminal. This car was already ancient when I got it." The woman nodded, studying the Honda with an appraising glance. "I might be able to help. My name is Raina." "Cassandra. And honestly, any help would be amazing. I've been stuck here for over an hour." Raina smiled. "I'm heading to Santa Fe. I can give you a ride if that works for your destination." It wasn't ideal. Cassandra had been driving to Denver, but Santa Fe would at least get her to civilization where she could figure out next steps. "That would be great," she said gratefully. "Let me grab my thing." As Cassandra collected her backpack and small suitcase from the Honda, Raina walked a slow circle around the disabled vehicle, her hand hovering just above the surface without touching it, as if feeling its energy. 16 years old, driven across the country 3 times, 2 minor accidents, and 1 very memorable road trip to Mexico that your parents never knew about, Raina said, conversationally. "This car has served you well." Cassandra froze, backpack half-zipped. "How could you possibly know any of that?" Raina's smile widened slightly. "Objects hold stories, especially vehicles. They absorb experiences. Most people just can't read them." She gestured toward her truck and trailer. Too bewildered to question further, Cassandra followed Raina to the pickup. As they approached, she noticed something odd about the vehicles that hadn't been apparent from a distance. Despite the blazing sun and highway dust, both the truck and Airstream were immaculately clean. Not just well-maintained, but literally spotless, as if they existed in a different relationship to the physical world than everything around them. "Your truck is beautiful," Cassandra said as Raina opened the passenger door for her. "I've never seen one this old in such perfect condition." "Thank you. I've had it a long time." Raina slid behind the wheel. "It's a fair trade for what I do." "What do you do?" Cassandra asked, settling into the surprisingly comfortable seat. The interior was pristine vintage with original details intact. Yet everything felt new. Instead of answering directly, Raina started the engine, which purred to life without the slightest hesitation. "I travel the highways of America, helping those in need. In exchange, I accept trades." "Trades?" Cassandra repeated, confused. Like a traveling salesperson, Raina pulled smoothly back onto the empty highway. "Not exactly. I trade in possibilities, potential futures. I offer choices to those at crossroads, literal or metaphorical." Cassandra laughed nervously. "That sounds cryptic." "It's actually quite straightforward," Raina replied, seemingly unbothered by Cassandra's skepticism. "Everyone comes to moments where their path divides. Most people make choices blindly, unaware of what waits down each fork. I simply illuminate the options and facilitate the trade." Before Cassandra could respond, Raina continued. "For instance, you're currently facing several diverging paths. You're on your way to Denver, supposedly to visit your father, but actually to avoid making decisions about college. You dropped out after 1 semester because the path others chose for you didn't fit. Now you're drifting, unsure what to trade your time and potential for." Cassandra stared at the woman, a chill running through her despite the heat. "How could you possibly know that?" "As I said, I read stories. Yours is written in your posture, your eyes, the way you packed your bag. Enough clothes for a long, indefinite stay, but only 1 book. No purpose, just motion." Raina's tone remained conversational, not judgmental. "It's a common story. Many people find themselves adrift on the highway of life. They drove in silence for several miles." Cassandra processing this strange encounter while watching the desert landscape roll past. The truck maintained a steady speed, the Airstream trailing behind with no sway or rattle. "So what exactly do you trade?" Cassandra finally asked. "And with whom?" "I trade with those who need what I offer, when our paths intersect at the right moment." Raina gestured toward the highway stretching before them. "The roads of America are veins carrying the lifeblood of countless stories. I drive these veins, stopping when I sense someone at a critical juncture who might benefit from my services." "That sounds supernatural," Cassandra said carefully. Raina laughed, a surprisingly warm sound. "Perhaps by your standards. I prefer to think of it as a specialized service. Some fix cars, some fix bodies, some fix lives. I help people trade one potential future for another." "And what do you get in return?" A fair exchange. Always something of equivalent value to what I provide. Before Cassandra could press further, Raina slowed the truck, pulling off the highway onto a small dirt road that Cassandra hadn't noticed until they were turning onto it. The road wasn't marked on any sign, and Cassandra was certain it hadn't been visible from a distance. Short detour, Raina explained, driving about a quarter-mile down the dirt track before stopping in a flat area surrounded by red rock formations. I need to check something in the airstream, and you might appreciate a break from the highway. The location was strikingly beautiful. A natural amphitheater of weathered sandstone, sheltered from the direct sun and highway noise. Cassandra followed Raina out of the truck, grateful for the chance to stretch her legs. "Make yourself comfortable," Raina said, gesturing to a small seating area that had somehow been set up beside the airstream. Two comfortable-looking chairs and a small table holding a pitcher of ice water that couldn't possibly have remained cold in this heat. As Cassandra poured herself a glass of the perfectly chilled water, Raina disappeared into the trailer. Left alone, Cassandra examined her surroundings more carefully. The airstream had no visible dust on it, despite the dirt road. The truck's tires showed no signs of wear, and now that she thought about it, they hadn't passed a gas station since her car broke down. Yet Raina had expressed no concern about fuel. Raina emerged from the airstream carrying a small wooden box. She sat in the chair opposite Cassandra, placing the box on the table between them. "Cassandra Lewis," she began. "Born October 17th, 1996, at a crossroads in more ways than one. Your mother was literally in transit when her labor began, giving birth to you at a highway rest stop in Kansas rather than the hospital 20 miles ahead." Cassandra's water glass froze halfway to her lips. That detail wasn't on any of her identification, which listed her birthplace as the hospital where she was taken afterward. Only her parents knew that story. "Who are you?" she whispered. "I told you. I'm the highway trader." Raina opened the wooden box, revealing what looked like a deck of oversized cards. "And you're at another crossroads now. Your car breaking down today wasn't random chance. It's a nexus point in your timeline, one of several moments where your future divides dramatically based on seemingly small choices." Despite her growing unease, Cassandra felt a pull of curiosity. "What choices?" Raina removed the cards from the box. They weren't playing cards as Cassandra had initially thought, but more like thick photographs, though currently facing down so she couldn't see their images. "I can show you 3 potential futures available to you from this moment," Raina explained. 3 paths your life might take, depending on decisions you make in the coming days. If you see one you prefer over your current trajectory, we can discuss the terms of a trade. "And the cost?" Cassandra asked, unable to help herself. "That depends on what you choose. The greater the deviation from your current path, the greater the trade required. But I never take more than the client can afford to lose." Raina arranged 3 cards face down on the table. "Shall I show you?" Every rational part of Cassandra's mind was screaming that this was absurd, impossible, potentially dangerous. Yet she found herself nodding. Raina turned over the first card. Instead of a static image, it showed a moving scene, like a video playing on impossibly thin paper. Cassandra saw herself, perhaps 5 years older, wearing surgical scrubs in what appeared to be a bustling emergency room. Her future self moved with confidence, issuing instructions to a nurse as she treated a young patient. "Medical school," Raina narrated. "You've always had the aptitude but lacked the confidence. In this future, you complete your education and become an emergency physician. You find the work challenging and meaningful, though it leaves little room for other pursuits." The scene shifted, showing Cassandra in an apartment, exhausted after a long shift, alone but surrounded by medical textbooks and professional achievements. "This path requires discipline and sacrifice, but offers security and the knowledge that you're directly saving lives. The trade would be relatively minor, just a nudge toward applying to complete your pre-med requirements. Reyna turned over the second card. This one showed an older Cassandra, perhaps in her mid-30s, standing at an artist's easel in a sun-filled studio. Around her were paintings in various stages of completion, landscapes that captured the same desert beauty surrounding them now. You abandoned art after your high school teacher criticized your work, Reyna commented. But in this future, you rediscover that passion. You struggle financially for several years, but eventually gain recognition for your unique perspective. Your work brings others joy and allows you to live in harmony with your own nature. The scene shifted to show Cassandra at a gallery opening, surrounded by admirers, her face alight with quiet pride. This path offers fulfillment, but less conventional success. The trade would be moderate. You would need to give up your belief that stability must come before creativity. The third card revealed yet another Cassandra, this one dressed for wilderness, leading a group of teenagers through a mountainous landscape. She looked strong, tanned, her expression serene as she pointed out features of the natural world to her attentive audience. Environmental education, Reyna explained. In this future, you combine your love of nature with your ability to connect with others. You work with troubled youth, helping them find purpose through wilderness experiences. Your impact is profound, though largely invisible to the wider world. The scene shifted to show Cassandra sitting around a campfire with colleagues, their laughter suggesting a deep camaraderie. This path offers community and purpose, though little material wealth. The trade would be significant. You would need to surrender your attachment to conventional measures of success and your fear of disappointing your parents. Cassandra stared at the three cards, each showing a life she could recognize as potentially hers, yet each so different from her current aimless existence. These are real possibilities, not just imaginary scenario. They are genuine branches from this moment in your timeline, Reyna confirmed, each requiring different decisions in the coming weeks, each leading to different forms of fulfillment and challenge. And what exactly would I be trading to get one of these future? As I said, it depends on which you choose. The physician path requires the least deviation from your probable future. So the trade is small, just a moment of courage to apply for the program. The artist's path requires trading away your security-seeking tendencies. The wilderness educator path requires the largest trade, giving up your parents' approval as a source of validation. Cassandra thought about this. So I'd be trading parts of myself, my personality? Not exactly. You'd be trading potentials. The potential to follow safer paths for the potential to follow more fulfilling ones. Or vice versa. You cannot gain something without giving up something of equal value. That is the law of fair exchange. And what do you get from this? Cassandra pressed. Why offer these trades at all? Reyna's expression grew more serious. I was once like you, standing at a crossroads, unaware of what each path held. I made a choice blindly, and have spent centuries regretting it. Now I travel the highways, ensuring others don't suffer the same fate. Centuries, Cassandra echoed. Time moves differently on the road, Reyna said simply, especially for those of us who exist between destinations rather than in them. A cold realization dawned on Cassandra. You're trapped, aren't you? Driving these roads forever as some kind of penance? Not penance. Purpose. Reyna gathered the cards, which had stopped their motion and returned to being simple images. I collect moments of genuine choice. The energy created when someone consciously selects one future over another. That energy sustains me and my vehicles, allowing us to continue our work. Cassandra looked at the immaculate truck and airstream with new understanding. They're powered by choices, by potential futures discarded, by the act of conscious choosing itself, Reyna corrected. Most humans move through their lives on autopilot, following paths of least resistance. When someone truly chooses, with full awareness of what they're gaining and losing, It creates a powerful energy. I harness that energy and use it to help others reach their own crossroads. Cassandra considered the three futures she'd been shown. Each appealed to different parts of her nature. Each required sacrifices she could understand. What if I don't choose any of them? She asked. What if I just continue on my current path? Reyna nodded, as if expecting the question. She withdrew a fourth card from the box and turned it over. This scene showed a much older Cassandra, gray-haired and lined, sitting in a small apartment surrounded by mementos of places visited but no evidence of deep connections or meaningful work. Her expression was one of quiet resignation. Without a conscious choice at this juncture, this is your most probable outcome. Not tragic, but characterized by a persistent sense of missed opportunities. You live a conventional life, working jobs that pay bills but never engage your talent. You travel occasionally but always as an observer, never fully participating in the places you visit or the communities you briefly join. The image was painful in its ordinariness, its lack of either great joy or great sorrow. It was a life of perpetual, almost finding purpose, almost making connections, almost discovering passion. I don't want that, Cassandra whispered. Then choose, Reyna said simply, returning the three original cards to the table. Which path calls to you most strongly? Cassandra studied each card again, seeing not just the external circumstances, but the person she would become in each scenario. The physician, respected but isolated. The artist, fulfilled but financially insecure. The wilderness guide, connected but unrecognized by conventional standards. After long consideration, she placed her hand on the third card, the wilderness educator. This one, she said with growing certainty. This is who I want to be. Reyna nodded, a hint of approval in her expression. A significant deviation from your current trajectory, but one well suited to your true nature. The trade required is substantial. You must surrender your dependence on external validation, particularly from your parents. Are you willing to make this exchange? Cassandra thought about her father waiting in Denver, about her mother's frequent reminders about practical careers and wasted potential. She thought about the hollow feeling that had driven her to drop out of business school despite her parents' disappointment. Yes, she said finally. I'm willing to trade their approval for my own. Then it is done. Reyna collected all the cards except the one Cassandra had chosen, which she left on the table. When we return to the highway, your path will align with this future, not without effort on your part. You'll still need to make daily choices consistent with this direction. But the major obstacles have been removed. Just like that. Cassandra asked, half expecting some dramatic magical effect. Just like that. Reyna confirmed. The most powerful changes often happen invisibly. With a simple decision, they returned to the truck and rejoined the highway. As they drove, Cassandra noticed subtle changes in the landscape. The same desert, but somehow fresher, more vibrant, as if she were seeing it through new eyes. When they reached Santa Fe 3 hours later, Reyna pulled into the parking lot of a small outfitter shop, with a help wanted sign in the window. This is where our paths diverge, she said. They're looking for someone to assist with their youth wilderness program this summer. The manager is a good person who values enthusiasm over experience. Cassandra stared at the shop, feeling a strange certainty that this was exactly where she needed to be. Thank you for everything. Reyna smiled. Remember, you've traded away one future for another. There may be moments when you glimpse what might have been, particularly when your parents express disappointment in your choices. In those moments, remember that this was a conscious trade, freely. As Cassandra collected her bags from the truck, she noticed something odd about the airstream. It seemed to be glowing slightly from within, pulsing with a subtle energy that hadn't been visible earlier. Your choice was a powerful one, Reyna explained, following her gaze. It will fuel my journey for quite some time. Do you ever stop? Cassandra asked suddenly. Ever settle down somewhere? Reyna looked down the highway, her expression momentarily distant. My crossroads passed long ago. Now I exist to help others navigate theirs. The roads are my home. She handed Cassandra a small token, what appeared to be an antique compass that upon closer inspection had no directional markings. Only a needle that pointed steadily in the direction Cassandra needed to go. If you ever find yourself truly lost, this will help you locate your path again, Reyna said. But use it sparingly. Too much guidance diminishes the value of finding your own way. With that, she returned to her truck. Cassandra watched as the immaculate vehicle and its gleaming airstream pulled away, rejoining the flow of highway traffic before disappearing with unnatural quickness. 10 years later, Cassandra Lewis had become one of the most respected wilderness therapy leaders in the Southwest. On a cool autumn evening, while leading a group of troubled teenagers through a remote section of the Gila wilderness, she spotted a familiar gleam of silver through the trees. An Airstream trailer parked at an overlook that shouldn't have been accessible by vehicle. Telling her co-leader she needed a moment alone, Cassandra made her way to the overlook. There stood Reyna, unchanged, gazing out at the sunset. "You found your path," Reyna said without turning, as if she'd been expecting this visit. "I did," Cassandra confirmed, "though it hasn't always been easy. The best paths never are." Cassandra reached into her pocket and withdrew the compass Reyna had given her a decade earlier. "I've never needed to use this. Even when things were difficult, I always knew which way to go." Reyna smiled. "That's how I knew you'd chosen correctly." As they stood watching the sunset, Cassandra noticed a battered pickup truck approaching on the distant highway, far below. A vehicle clearly in distress, smoke pouring from under its hood. "Another crossroads?" she asked. Reyna nodded. "Life is full of them. Most people never notice the moments that truly determine their future." "Will you ever reach a destination?" Cassandra asked. "Or are you bound to the highways forever?" "The journey is my destination," Reyna replied, moving toward her truck. "But I find purpose in each intersection, each trade that helps someone find their true path." As Reyna drove away, descending toward the stranded motorist below, Cassandra understood something she hadn't 10 years earlier. The highway trader wasn't trapped in an endless journey. She had chosen it, preferring the power of facilitating others' crossroads to settling at any destination of her own. Some people belong to places. Others, like Reyna, belong to the spaces in between. The empty roads where possibilities converge and futures are traded in the fading light of desert sunset.